every Australian grocery aisle from 1941 to 2015. 74 years. The Franklin's yellow and red logo. The No Frills black and white peanut butter jar. The big fresh animatronic singing chickens at Leichhardt. The more in your trolley for less TV commercials. 287 Franklin supermarkets at the year 2000 peak, Australia's third largest grocery chain. Then, in February 2001, Dairy Farm International of Hong Kong announced a US $129.4 million write-down. The chain was broken up. Woolworths took 67 of the best stores. Coles took 37. Foodland took another 36. In April 2015, the last Franklin's closed at Westfield Miranda. A Coles supermarket took the space. And almost nobody knows the truth about Franklin's, not founded in 1978, founded in 1941, mid-World War II. How did Woolworths and Coles destroy Australia's #1 discount empire? Before we go any further, if you want to keep these stories alive, I've created a book with the complete Australian lost factories. The workers, the gates, the Australian maid, all gone. The link is on the first line of the description. Back to the story. Chapter 1. Westfield Miranda, April 2015-2026. Walk to Westfield Miranda in Sydney's Sutherland Shire. Level 1 of the shopping centre. The Coles supermarket occupies part of the space where, until April 2015, the last Franklin store in Australia operated. Sue Swan worked at the Miranda Franklin's on its closing day. Franklin staff member, long-tenured Australian retail worker. She told the St George and Sutherland Shire Leader newspaper verbatim, "There were people who worked there up to 30 years and you got to know all the customers." That was the last Franklin's in Australia, April 2015, 74 years after Franklin's was founded in Sydney in 1941. Because Franklin's wasn't founded in 1978, when the No Frills discount revolution launched. And it wasn't founded by Norman Teak, the retail entrepreneur most Australians associate with the brand. Franklin's was founded in 1941, the middle of the Second World War, by a Newcastle-born Baptist grocer named Frank August Lindstrom, and the name Franklin's itself carries a hidden World War II tribute. Per the Australian Dictionary of Biography verbatim, the name is a mixture of his own name and that of Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States of America. Read that again, 1941. A Sydney grocery chain named after the American president who was leading the United States through the Second World War. At its peak in the year 2000, Franklin's operated 287 stores across every Australian mainland state. Australia's third largest supermarket chain. The pioneer of generic brand No Frills packaging. The chain that forced Woolworths to launch home brand and Coles to launch Scotch Buy. Then in February 2001, Dairy Farm International of Hong Kong announced a US $129.4 million write-down. The chain was broken up. Woolworths took 67 of the best located stores. Coles took 37. Foodland took 36 to 45 stores across Queensland and northern New South Wales. Pick n Pay of South Africa took the New South Wales operation. By April 2015, none of it was left. This is the story of how the Australian supermarket duopoly consolidated one of Australia's great grocery empires over 14 years, from 2001 to 2015, and how the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission tried, and mostly failed, to prevent it. Chapter 2. Frank Lindstrom, Rewind, Newcastle, New South Wales. 23rd of November, 1890. Frank August Lindstrom is born. Son of Per Olaf Lindstrom, a Swedish-born tailor who emigrated to Newcastle in the late 19th century. Mother, Mary Hannah Lindstrom, née Jacobs, English-born on the Isle of Wight. Australian-born son of a Swedish father and English mother. devout Baptist family. Frank Lindstrom becomes a lifelong church organist. By 1913, aged 23, Frank Lindstrom and his brother Harry established Lindstrom Bros Proprietary Limited, a chain of small suburban grocery stores across the Hunter region, including Newcastle, Maitland and Lake Macquarie. Cash trade, working-class Newcastle customers. By the late 1930s, Lindstrom Bros Proprietary Limited operates approximately 40 to 50 grocery stores across the Hunter. One of the largest regional grocery chains in New South Wales. Then World War II changes everything. Sugar rationing begins August 1942, butter rationing June 1942, petrol rationing, tea rationing, meat rationing. Australian grocers scramble to source stock. Australian consumers hold ration books. Lindstrom Bros contracts through the war years, from 40 to 50 stores across the Hunter down to approximately 25 stores by the mid-1940s. Half the chain closed, but Lindstrom does something remarkable during the war. He consigns grocery parcels to England, where British rationing is more severe than Australian rationing. Food parcels to his mother's country. He also funds Baptist missionaries. Then in 1941, mid-war, Frank Lindstrom registers a new grocery brand in Sydney. Not in Newcastle, a new brand for the Sydney market. He calls it Franklin's. Per the Australian Dictionary of Biography verbatim, the name is a mixture of his own name and that of Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States of America. Frank Lindstrom names his new Sydney grocery chain after himself and after the American wartime president. He builds 10 Franklin stores across Sydney's suburbs between 1944 and 1954. Then, in 1954, at age 64, Lindstrom sells the 10-store Franklin's chain to 2 Sydney businessmen, approximately £15,000 to £20,000. Cornock and Tiak via the Sargent's Limited Caterers Company. Lindstrom also sells his Newcastle chain, Lindstrom Bros Proprietary Limited, plus a later self-service chain called Goodways, to wholesalers Matthews Thompson and Company Limited in late 1958. Frank Lindstrom lives another 24 years. Dies at Stirling in the Adelaide Hills of pneumonia on the 7th of November 1982, aged 91. He never sees the No Frills discount revolution, never sees Dairy Farm International, never sees the 2001 breakup, never sees Woolworths take 67 of his heritage stores. Chapter 3. 1954. 1954. Sydney. 2 men buy Franklins from Frank Lindstrom. Harold Cornock, Sydney businessman. Director of Sargent's Limited Caterers. Norman Robert Teak, born 2nd of February 1916, in Leichhardt, Sydney. Son of Karl Ludwig Teak, German immigrant who arrived in Australia around 1910 and ran a shoe repair shop in Five Dock. Mother, Maud Adeline Victoria Mace. Teak left school at 13. Joined Woolworths in 1938 as the company's youngest trainee manager. Rose through Woolworths retail ranks in the 1940s and early 1950s. Then, on the 20th of December 1951, Norman Teak opened what he claimed was Australia's first supermarket at Hurstville, southern Sydney. Self-service retail. Checkout aisles. Trolley shopping. American format grocery retail imported to Australia by an ex-Woolworths trainee manager. 3 years later, 1954, Teak and Cornock buy Franklin's from Frank Lindstrom. The buying vehicle, Sargent's Limited, the catering company where Cornock and Teak are directors. Purchase price, approximately 15,000 to 20,000 Australian pounds. For 10 Franklin stores across suburban Sydney. Under Cornock and Teak, Franklin's expands cautiously through the 1960s and 1970s. Discount focus. Working class Sydney customer base. Aggressive price competition against the Woolworths. And Coles supermarket chains that emerged in the 1950s and 60s. By 1978, 24 years of Cornock and Teak ownership, Franklin's operates 75 stores across New South Wales. Then Teak and Cornock sell to a Hong Kong-listed company, Dairy Farm International, a subsidiary of Jardine Matheson, one of the great British Hong Kong trading houses that had dominated Asian commerce since the 1800s. Reported purchase price, Australian dollars 33.6 million. Single source reporting, treat with caution. The name Franklin's now belongs to Hong Kong. Chapter 4. No Frills. 1978. Dairy Farm International owns Franklin's. Same year, Dairy Farm launches the retail revolution that changes Australian shopping. Franklin's No Frills. 3 products at launch: peanut butter, honey, potato chips, generic packaging, black text on white background, no product photography, no branding sophistication, no advertising, no music in stores, no electronic cash registers, just extremely low prices. The original Franklin's No Frills motto, verbatim: no extras, no service, no music and no electronic cash, only articles at extremely low prices. By the mid-1980s, Franklin's No Frills expands from 3 products to over 800 product lines, every basic grocery category: generic peanut butter, generic honey, generic breakfast cereal, generic dishwashing liquid, generic milk, generic bread, generic tinned tomatoes, generic laundry powder. Australian consumers respond. The recession of the early 1980s. Working-class Australian families squeezed by inflation and rising unemployment. Franklin's No Frills prices are 20 to 30% below branded equivalents. For Australian families in the western suburbs of Sydney, in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, in the working-class northern suburbs of Adelaide, in the industrial suburbs of Newcastle and Wollongong. Franklin's No Frills changes the household grocery budget. Buying peanut butter for $1 instead of $1.60. Buying honey for $1.50 instead of $2.40. Buying breakfast cereal for $2 instead of $3.20. Small savings on individual items, but across a full grocery shop, 20% lower total. Woolworths responds, launches home brand as its own generic range. Coles responds, launches Scotch Buy, later renamed Savings. Australia's supermarket duopoly copies the Franklin's innovation. Australian retail is transformed. The Australian discount grocery segment, as a permanent category, not just a Franklin's innovation, is established by 1985. But Dairy Farm keeps expanding Franklin's nationally. 1982. Franklin's enters Victoria. First Victorian stores at Deer Park, Gladstone Park, Glenferrie. 1983. Franklin's enters Queensland. First Queensland store at Toowoomba. 1989. Franklin's enters South Australia and the Australian Capital Territory. 1990. Franklin's opens its 200th store. Adds attached Liquor Save discount alcohol outlets. 1992. Dairy Farm launches Franklin's Big Fresh, a food barn concept imported from Dairy Farm's New Zealand operation. First Big Fresh at Leichhardt, inner Western Sydney. Animatronic singing chickens, dancing fruit, farm-themed decor, in-store butchers, bakers, fresh produce counters. In some larger stores like the Big Fresh at Gosford, an in-store Commonwealth Bank mini branch and a hairdressing kiosk. Franklin's as retail destination, not just grocery store. 1994. Franklin's launches fresh format. First at Engadine, southern Sydney. Then Franklin's mini fresh format for smaller locations. Then in-house radio station FRFM playing across Franklin's stores nationally. 1998. Franklin's launches its first television advertising campaign. Slogan: more in your trolley for less. By the end of the year 2000, Franklin's operates 287 stores across Australia, Australia's third largest supermarket chain. Substantial national grocery revenue at the peak of the Dairy Farm International expansion. Chapter 5, 25th January 2001, 25th of January 2001. Sydney. 2 supermarket stores open quietly without fanfare. Store 1, Marrickville, Inner Western Sydney. Store 2, near Bankstown Airport, southwestern Sydney. Both stores carry a logo Australian consumers have never seen before. Blue background, red letters, 4 letters, ALDI. Aldi opens its first 2 Australian stores on the 25th of January, 2001. Aldi Süd, German discount supermarket chain, founded post-war by the Albrecht brothers in Essen, Germany, operates thousands of stores across Europe, enters Australia via New South Wales in a strategic January opening. The Aldi format, smaller stores than Woolworths or Coles. Limited product range, approximately 1,500 stock-keeping units versus 25,000 at Woolworths. Aggressive generic branding, very low prices. Weekly special buy rotation of non-grocery items. Sounds familiar, discount format, generic packaging, very low prices. That is the Franklin's No Frills model. Pioneered in Australia in 1978, 23 years before Aldi arrived. But Aldi's format is more disciplined, more capital efficient, smaller stores, fewer stock-keeping units, lower operating costs, and backed by one of the world's largest privately owned retail companies. Aldi opens 2 stores on the 25th of January, 2001, and in the same month, Dairy Farm International begins the internal strategic review that will conclude with the announcement to break up Franklin's. The Australian discount grocery market is about to be restructured, and it will not be restructured in favour of the Sydney-founded Franklin's chain. The coincidence is worth pausing on. Aldi opens 2 Sydney stores in January 2001. Franklin's, the 23-year-old Australian discount pioneer, is about to be broken up. Aldi will fill the discount niche Franklin's helped create, but not as Franklin's. As Aldi, German capital, German operational discipline, German private ownership, growing to 600 Australian stores over the next 24 years. The Australian discount grocery consumer is not abandoned. The Australian discount grocery format continues, just under a different flag, and with the third domestic supermarket chain dissolved, Woolworths and Coles absorb the mid-market share, while Aldi absorbs the discount share. Chapter 6, Ian Cornell, February 2001. Dairy Farm International announces the Franklin Strategic Review conclusion. Managing Director Ian Cornell presents the findings publicly. Ian Cornell, verbatim. The review clearly showed that while many Franklin stores were profitable, the overall business was not viable. Dairy Farm International will exit the Australian grocery market entirely. The Franklin's chain will be broken up, store by store sale to multiple acquirers. US $129.4 million write-down announced. Australian retail analysts stunned. Franklin's share price, Dairy Farm International, Hong Kong listed, falls sharply. 267 Franklin supermarkets to be sold, some to Woolworths, some to Coles, some to Foodland, some to Pick n Pay, some to independent IGA-affiliated operators, Roger Corbett, Woolworths CEO. Since January 1999, sees the opportunity. Woolworths initially proposes acquiring approximately 80 of the best-located Franklin stores across Sydney and Melbourne, the highest turnover locations. But the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission intervenes. ACCC Chairman, Professor Alan Fells, Melbourne University Competition Law Academic, ACCC, Chairman since 1995, reviews the proposed break-up structure. Woolworths' verbatim statement reflecting the ACCC discussions. Franklin's had initially planned to offer Woolworths significantly more stores. However, following discussions with the ACCC, we have scaled this back to approximately 80 stores. The ACCC does not block the breakup. Australian competition law provides no power to block a foreign shareholder's decision to exit an Australian market. Instead, on the 22nd of May 2001, the ACCC accepts legally enforceable undertakings from Dairy Farm International, Franklin's and Woolworths via ACCC Media, Release 12001. The final store allocation. Woolworths, 67 and Franklin stores. The best located, highest turnover stores across New South Wales, Victoria and other states. Coles Myer, 37 Franklin stores. Foodland Associated Limited, approximately 36 to 45 Franklin stores across Queensland and northern New South Wales, plus warehouses. Announced 25th of June 2001 for US $81 million. Foodland rebrands them to Action Supermarkets in 2002. Pick n Pay of South Africa, the remaining New South Wales Franklin stores, plus the Franklin's and No Frills brand names, plus 19 Fresco supermarkets. Independent IGA-affiliated operators, approximately 120 Franklin stores, channelled through a joint independent divestiture alliance created for the breakup. Franklin says the sell-down transferred more than $2.38 billion in annual sales, more than 60% of Franklin's total turnover, to independent operators. Ian Cornell walks away. Dairy Farm International walks away. The Franklin's yellow and red logo begins to disappear from Australian shopping centres, replaced by the Woolworths green and red, the Coles red and the IGA red. Chapter 7. The Duopoly. AC Nielsen Market Share Data. March 2001, the month after the breakup announcement. Before the breakup, Woolworths, 37.4% of Australian packaged grocery sales. Coles, 33.5%. Franklin's, 11.6%. Independents, 17.5%. After the 2001 breakup, Woolworths, 41.2%. Up nearly 4 points. Coles Myer, 34.5%. Up 1 point. Independents, approximately 18 to 20%, with the JIDA-channelled stores absorbed. Franklin's, 0%. Dissolved. A C. Nielsen forecast quoted in Just Food March 2001, verbatim. Analysts predict that they will soon have an 80% duopoly of the market, two supermarket chains, Woolworths and Coles, controlling 80% of Australian packaged grocery retail sales. Roger Corbett, Woolworths CEO, becomes one of the most powerful executives in Australian retail. Under his leadership, Woolworths brand consolidation extends beyond supermarkets. To fuel through the Woolworths Petrol and Caltex partnership, liquor through Dan Murphy's and BWS, consumer electronics through the Dick Smith Electronics acquisition, and pharmacy through various ventures. John Fletcher takes the Coles Myer CEO role from 2001. Coles Myer restructures, and in 2007, Wesfarmers, the Perth-based conglomerate led by Richard Goyder, acquires Coles Group for $19.3 billion. Australian corporate history's largest takeover at the time. Coles becomes a Wesfarmers subsidiary. Meanwhile, Aldi expands aggressively from its 2 January 2001 stores. Aldi opens its 100th Australian store by 2007. 500th store by 2014. By 2025, Aldi operates approximately 600 Australian stores. Metcash-supplied IGA independents hold approximately 7% by 2025. The 2001 Franklin's breakup didn't create an absolute two-supermarket monopoly. It created an oligopoly. Woolworths 38%, Coles 29%, Aldi 9%, Metcash IGA 7%, per the ACCC's 2025 supermarkets. Inquiry final report. But the number 3 chain, Franklin's, at 11.6%, was eliminated, and the 67 best Franklin stores went to Australia's number 1 chain, Woolworths. Chapter 8. Pick n Pay. Meanwhile, in Johannesburg, South Africa, Pick n Pay Retailers Limited, JSE listed, founded by Raymond Ackerman in 1967, assesses the Australian re-entry of the opportunity. Pick n Pay had first tried Australia in 1982, opened a Brisbane store, but Australian trade unions boycotted the store under anti-apartheid protest campaigns. Pick n Pay withdrew from Australia around 1986. Additional obstacle in 2001, Coles Myer owns the Pick n Pay brand name in Australia. Pick n Pay cannot use its own brand in the Australian market, even after apartheid ended in 1994. But in 2001, Pick n Pay sees an opportunity. Buy the Franklin's New South Wales stores from Dairy Farm. Operate them under the existing Franklin's and No Frills brand names. Coles doesn't own those. Franchise growth potential across Sydney. Pick n Pay buys approximately 50 Franklin stores plus 19 Fresco supermarkets, the Fresco's rebranded to Franklin's. Total, approximately 69 to 86 stores across New South Wales. Australian Managing Director, Aubrey Zielinski. Finance Director, Ronnie Perlov. CEO Sean Summers oversees from Johannesburg until 2007. Then Nick Badminton succeeds Summers as Pick n Pay. CEO. Pick n Pay invests an Australian dollars 200 million in the Australian Franklin's operation across 2001 to 2010. Store refits, distribution upgrades, Franklin's family franchised locations, marketing. But the numbers do not work. Aubrey Zielinski, verbatim to IOL Business Report. In 2007, a Australian dollars 200 million investment, Franklin's made a trading loss of Rand 46.4 million, compared with a loss of Rand 92.7 million the year before. This is going to be the first return on our investment. Franklin's under Pick n Pay reaches small profits by 2008, never consolidates them. Pick n Pay retreats to New South Wales only, never expands back into Victoria, Queensland, South Australia or the ACT. Fights Woolworths and Coles for New South Wales share. Losers. By July 2010, Pick n Pay has 85 supermarkets in Australia, 77 corporate stores, plus 8 franchise Franklin's family locations. Approximately 5,000 employees. Gareth Ackerman, Pick n Pay chairman since 2010, son of founder Raymond Ackerman, makes the call. Sell Franklin's, exit Australia. Booking a Rand 550 million profit on the 10-year exit. The Pick n Pay Australian experiment ends. 10 years, 200 million Australian dollars invested, 5,000 employees, 85 stores across New South Wales at exit. The lesson, a South African supermarket chain, well-run, JSE listed, experienced across African markets, could not compete with Woolworths and Coles even in a single Australian state. New South Wales alone, Sydney's home market, with the established Franklin's brand and the No Frills discount format. Even that was not enough scale. Because Australian grocery retail, by 2010, is a scale business. Distribution warehouses, national advertising, loyalty program data, fresh food logistics, store brand product development, category management, category buying power at scale. Woolworths operates approximately 1,000 supermarkets nationally. Coles operates approximately 800 supermarkets nationally. Both companies span every Australian state. Pick n Pay operates 85 stores in one state. The mathematics do not work. Cannot work. Pick n Pay exits. Australia in 2011 never returns. Chapter 9 Metcash, July 2010. Pick n Pay agrees to sell Franklin's to Metcash Limited. Purchase price Australian dollars 215 million. Metcash Limited, Australia's largest grocery wholesaler and operator of the IGA-affiliated independent supermarket network. Chief Executive Officer Andrew Reitzer, a South African-born Australian executive who led Metcash through the 2000s. Andrew Reitzer, verbatim to Australian Food News, 1st of July 2010. The Franklin's acquisition would grow the market share of Metcash-supplied retailers in the state from 11% to 17%. The ACCC opposes. 17th of November 2010. ACCC Chairman Rod Sims, successor to Alan Fels, announces the ACCC will oppose the Metcash Franklin's acquisition. Legal action commenced in the Federal Court of Australia. The ACCC argument. The Metcash acquisition of Franklin's would substantially lessen competition in the wholesale supply of packaged groceries to independent grocery retailers in New South Wales and the Australian Capital Territory. Sims and the ACCC seek an injunction to prevent the acquisition. The federal court hearing runs through mid-2011. Justice Arthur Emmett presides. Emmett rules against the ACCC on the 25th of August, 2011, finding that integrated operators like Coles, Woolworths and Aldi do competitively constrain grocery wholesalers. The ACCC seeks an injunction to prevent Metcash from completing the acquisition pending appeal. Injunction denied. 20th of September 2011. Metcash completes the Franklin's acquisition. 30th of September 2011. Gareth Ackerman, verbatim to News 24 on the completion date. We are delighted to complete the sale of Franklin's to Metcash, following a 15-month delay since the transaction was first announced. The ACCC appeals to the full federal court. 30th of November 2011. Full Federal Court, Justices Finn, Buchanan and Yates, dismisses the ACCC appeal. Orders the ACCC to pay Metcash's legal costs. The ACCC declines to seek High Court leave on the 5th of December 2011. Metcash owns Franklin's, but Metcash is a wholesaler, not a retail supermarket operator. Metcash's business model is to supply independent IGA-affiliated grocers with wholesale product, not to run retail stores directly. So Metcash converts the Franklin stores to IGA banners, or sells them to independent IGA operators, including Ritchie's IGA and dozens of family-owned regional retail businesses. Over 3 years, 2012 through 2015, Metcash converts more than 80 former Franklin stores to IGA banners. Metcash also relaunches the No Frills brand in 2012 as an IGA-affiliated discount range. The generic black and white packaging returns to Australian supermarket shelves under IGA banner distribution, not Franklin's branding. The Franklin's name begins to disappear from Australian shopping centres. Chapter 10, April 2015. By early 2015, one Franklin store remains open in Australia. Westfield Miranda, Sydney's Sutherland Shire, Level 1 of the shopping centre. April 2015. The last Franklin store closes. Sue Swan works at the Miranda Franklins on the closing day, speaks to the St George and Sutherland Shire Leader newspaper. Verbatim. There were people who worked there up to 30 years and you got to know all the customers. 30 years. Franklin staff who had worked at the Miranda location since the mid-1980s through dairy farm ownership, through the No Frills years, through the Big Fresh format, through the 2001 breakup, through Pick and Pay, through the Metcash acquisition, and now to closure. The last shift ends, the doors close. The Franklin signage comes down. The Westfield Miranda staff photograph. A group of Franklin's workers gathered together on the final day, some in Franklin's uniforms, some just clocking off after their last shift, is preserved by the St George and Sutherland Shia Leader Archive. Long-tenured staff. Some who had worked at the Miranda store through dairy farm ownership, through the No Frills years, through Pick and Pay, through the Metcash conversion. Now clocking off for the last time. A Coles supermarket takes over part of the vacated Miranda space. 74 years after Frank Lindstrom registered Franklin's in Sydney in 1941, honouring US President Franklin D. Roosevelt in the middle of World War II, the last Franklin store closes in a Westfield shopping centre next to a new Coles. The badge dies. The brand, as a retail storefront chain, dies. The 10 Sydney stores Lindstrom built. The 75 stores Norman Teak built. The 287 stores Dairy Farm International built. The Big Fresh Singing Chickens at Leichhardt. The FRFM in-store radio. The More in Your Trolley for Less television advertising. The 2.38 billion Australian dollars in annual sales channelled to independents in 2001. All gone from Australian retail storefronts. Almost. The No Frills generic brand black and white packaging survives. Metcash relaunched it in 2012 as an IGA-affiliated discount range. Peanut butter, honey, potato chips, the original 3 1978 products, plus hundreds of other product lines, all under IGA banner distribution across Australia. The discount philosophy that Frank Lindstrom's chain pioneered and that Dairy Farm International expanded survives in Australian supermarket shelves. The company does not. Chapter 11. The Duopoly 1, 2026. Walk to any Australian supermarket. What do you see? Woolworths or Coles, sometimes Aldi, sometimes an independent IGA in a smaller regional centre, occasionally a Costco in outer suburbs, not Franklin's. Meanwhile, at 1 Woolworths Way, Bella Vista, New South Wales, Woolworths Group Limited headquarters, continues to operate approximately 1,000 Australian supermarkets plus liquor stores, petrol stations and financial services. Meanwhile, at 800 Toorak Road, Hawthorn East, Victoria, Coles Group Limited headquarters, continues to operate approximately 800 Australian supermarkets plus liquor and financial services. Owned by Perth-based Wesfarmers since the 2007 acquisition. Meanwhile, at Metcash Limited's major New South Wales distribution facility at Minchinbury, Western Sydney, Metcash continues to supply approximately 1,500 independent IGA-affiliated grocery retailers across Australia, including some former Franklin's locations still operating as independent IGAs. Meanwhile, at Westfield Miranda, the Coles supermarket that took over the vacated Franklin's space. Australian consumers who once shopped Franklin's now shop Coles, or Woolworths, or Aldi, or IGA. Never Franklin's. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, in its February 2025 Supermarkets Inquiry Final Report with Chair Gina Cass-Gottlieb, documents the current market. Woolworths 38% of Australian supermarket grocery sales. Coles 29%. Aldi 9%. Metcash supplied IGA independents 7%. The report describes Australia's supermarket sector as an oligopolistic market structure. Coles and Woolworths, per the ACCC finding, are more profitable than Walmart, Tesco, Ahold, Carrefour and Kroger, the equivalent oligopolies in the United States, United Kingdom, Netherlands and France. 20 recommendations in the final report. No forced divestiture, no structural remedy. The 2001 Franklin's breakup created this market structure, not overnight. The duopoly consolidation continued through the 2000s and 2010s with the Coles Wesfarmers acquisition, the Aldi expansion, the Kaufland attempted entry abandoned in 2020, and various smaller consolidations. But the trigger event was February 2001. Dairy Farm International's US $129.4 million write-down. The May 2001 ACCC undertakings. The breakup that transferred Franklin's 11.6% Australian market share to Woolworths, Coles and independents. Frank Lindstrom's 1941 Sydney grocery chain, named after President Franklin D. Roosevelt in the middle of World War II, ended in April 2015 when a Coles took the vacated Miranda space. Lesson 1. The founder wasn't Norman Teak, and the name was a wartime tribute. Every industrial South viewer who grew up in Australia through the 1980s and 90s assumes Franklin's was founded by Norman Teak in 1978. That's when No Frills launched. That's when Franklin's became famous. That's what most Australian retail histories imply wrong. Franklin's was founded in Sydney in 1941, the middle of the Second World War, by Frank August Lindstrom, a Newcastle-born Baptist grocer whose earlier Hunter region chain, Lindstrom Bros Proprietary Limited, had just been shrunk by wartime rationing from 40 stores to 25. And the name, per the Australian Dictionary of Biography verbatim, is a mixture of his own name and that of Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States of America. Read that again, 1941. A Sydney grocery chain named after the American wartime president. This is not the story most Australians know. This is the story the Australian Dictionary of Biography preserves. Frank Lindstrom, devout Baptist and church organist, built 10 Sydney Franklin stores by 1954, sold to Cornock and Teak for approximately £15,000 to £20,000. Teak grew to 75 stores by 1978, sold to Dairy Farm International for Australian dollars, $33.6 million. Dairy Farm launched No Frills the same year, Australia's discount revolution. But Franklin's itself started 37 years earlier, in wartime Sydney, by a Newcastle-born grocer whose Newcastle chain had just been halved by rationing. The corporate legends we inherit are usually simpler than the corporate truths preserved in archives. Franklin's is one of those cases. The famous version, Norman Teak founding a discount empire in 1978, is a compression of a longer history. The real founder died in an Adelaide Hills nursing home in 1982, 4 years after selling to Hong Kong, aged 91, of pneumonia. He never saw the No Frills revolution he had unwittingly seeded. Lesson 2. When the third player dies, the duopoly wins. Australian grocery retail in the year 2000 had 3 major supermarket chains competing for consumer spending. Woolworths at 37.4%, Coles at 33.5%, Franklin's at 11.6%, plus independent IGA operators at 17.5%. 3 major chains. 3-way competition on pricing, on service, on format innovation. Franklin's was the discount format innovator. Franklin's No Frills forced Woolworths to launch home brand. Franklin's No Frills forced Coles to launch Scotch Buy. The pressure of a third competitor kept the Australian supermarket majors innovating on price. Then February 2001. Dairy Farm International announces the breakup. Woolworths takes 67 of the best located stores. Coles takes 37. Foodland takes 36 to 45. Pick n Pay takes the New South Wales operation. Independent IGA operators take approximately 120 stores. Franklin's, as a chain, as a national third competitor, dissolves. Here's the thing. When a market goes from 3 major players to 2, competitive pressure declines, innovation slows, prices rise, margins expand. That is not villainy. That is oligopoly economics, well documented in every developed country retail market. The ACCC, February 2025. Supermarkets Inquiry finds Woolworths and Coles more profitable than Walmart, Tesco, Ahold, Carrefour and Kroger. More profitable than the equivalent oligopolies in the United States, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, France and the American Midwest. Australian consumers pay for Franklin's death every time they buy groceries. Not overtly, just structurally. Lesson 3. Regulators can enforce undertakings. They cannot reverse duopolies. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has been the notional regulator of Australian supermarket competition since 1995, under Chairman Professor Alan Fels, then Graham Samuel, then Rod Sims and now Gina Cass-Gottlieb. 4 chairs, 30 years of oversight. The ACCC intervened in the 2001 Franklin's breakup, scaled back the Woolworths acquisition from an initially proposed 80 stores to 67, channelled approximately 120 stores to independent IGA operators via the Joint Independent Divestiture Alliance. Accepted legally enforceable undertakings from Dairy Farm International, Franklin's and Woolworths. This was legitimate regulatory action within available legal powers. The ACCC also intervened in the 2010 Metcash acquisition of Pick n Pay's Franklin's. Rod Sims announced ACCC opposition on the 17th of November 2010. Federal court proceedings commenced. Justice Arthur Emmett ruled for Metcash on the 25th of August 2011. Full Federal Court dismissed the ACCC appeal on the 30th of November 2011. ACCC declined High Court leave on the 5th of December 2011. This was ambitious regulatory action and it failed on legal merits. The ACCC, February 2025. Supermarkets Inquiry Final Report makes 20 recommendations. No forced divestiture. No structural remedy for existing concentration. Because Australian competition law does not currently provide for forced divestiture as a remedy for existing market concentration. Only for blocking new mergers. Only for accepting undertakings during acquisitions. Once a market has consolidated, the ACCC can investigate. Publish reports. Recommend legislation. But cannot break up existing oligopolies. That is a Parliament-level policy choice, not an ACCC power. When the Franklin's breakup happened in 2001, the moment for structural intervention was the ACCC undertakings on the 22nd of May. Once accepted, once Franklin's was distributed to Woolworths, Coles, Foodland, Pick n Pay and Independents, the market structure was set. 24 years later, in the 2025 final report, the ACCC documents the consequences, cannot undo them. Australian supermarket competition today is what the Franklin's breakup made it. April 2015, Westfield Miranda, Sydney. A Coles took the space. Franklin D. Roosevelt's name faded from Australian retail after 74 years.